Hi everyone, Rich Crescenti with another in our series of videos making music with Melodyne. And today what we're going to be focusing on is getting sounds to sit within a mix. This is part 2 of our series. Now in the last series, we focused a lot on Melodyne Assistant and Editor and the tools that you had there. Today what we're going to be focusing on is within Melodyne Studio. So you need the flagship version, Melodyne Studio, to work with the sound editor and some of the things that we're going to show you today. Now, what we're dealing with today is getting these sounds to sit within a mix. And as we mentioned in the previous video, this is a hard thing to do. It's one of the hardest parts about mixing is getting everything to sit where you want it to sit. And we have a lot of tools that help us, compressors, equalizers, time-based effects, but Melodyne has a different set of implementations, a different set of instruments that give us some different controls over this. And so we can use those other tools, but sometimes Melodyne can do what those other processors can't. All right, so let's dive in and take a look. Now, as I said today, we're going to be using Melodyne Studio, and that is specifically the sound editor. And that is these bars that are right here. If you click on this, you'll see this opens up a window at the bottom. Now, I want to do just a real quick tour of the sound editor. We're going to be spreading this one out apart a few different videos. First, we see right here our harmonics. Not only do we have control over the harmonics, and this gives us the fundamental and all of these other harmonics on top of that, but we've got control over the low harmonics and the high harmonics as well. You'll notice there's some sliders on the bottom. Those give us control over these harmonics bars. Apart from being able to drag up one of the individuals, we can also alter them globally with these sliders right here. The same thing holds true with the EQ section. We can alter individual frequencies, or we can use these sliders to change the balance of that there. But today, and there's the synth section as well, which gives us the individual controls over the spectrum, the formant, and the amplitude. But today what we're going to be focusing on are these two sliders right here, and they exist separately from this whole other section. And I kind of want to start with these first because I tend to start with these first when I'm working on some sounds inside here. These two sliders are emphasis, which is this slider right here, and dynamics. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about what we can do with these right here. I think these are both incredibly useful for getting these sounds to pop out. The emphasis slider. What this does is this takes what is unique about this note compared to the other notes around it and either emphasizes those differences or de-emphasizes them. And this has the effect of getting individual sounds to sort of pop out at you a little bit or blend back into the mix. This is something that talented and skilled musicians do on their own. They play with a specific attitude. Sometimes they play with attitude that makes those notes jump out. Sometimes they try and blend back in a little bit. You can do this in the same way that those musicians can using this slider right here. All right, so let's listen to this song. This is the same song that we had last week. This is Jet Lag by Colatura. I've got 8 bars of it on loop. Let's just give a listen to the song itself and see what it sounds like. Okay, great. And what we're going to be focusing on today is this acoustic guitar track right here. So let's solo this and just hear this acoustic guitar on its own so you know what we're dealing with. Okay, great. Just a very simple, basic sort of strumming rhythm guitar pattern, popular in a lot of like rock and pop music. All right, great. So one of the first things I want to do, and this is different from the sound editor, but I'm going to go into note assignment mode. And that's because for this sound editor, a lot of the tools that we use in here work on each individual note. And as you can see, Melodyne did not break these notes up the way that I think they should be broken up. I really want to break each one of these up. So there's an easy thing that you can do. You can go into your note assignment mode right here, which is this wrench, And then what we want to do is come up here to our note separations. And here we see all of these divisions, all these places where Melodyne thinks there might be a separation right there. And this makes sense. This looks like eighth note separations all the way across. So what I want to do right here is I'm just going to hit Command A, select all of those, and I'm going to right click and choose Reseparate Notes at the Starting Point Lines. All of those triangles with those lines going down right there, those are the starting point lines. And I want each of these notes to be affected by this, so I want to separate where these notes are. This is not something you have to worry about all the time, unless it might cause a problem for you. And in this case, I think this will help us to separate these. So here we go. This will take a second while we separate them. But what this is basically doing, again, is just breaking these into each one of these individual notes right there. And now you can see we've got individual notes, and this much more closely matches the actual strumming pattern that we see. When we go back into edit mode, we see this is broken up. Now, when we just play, it's not going to sound any different. But when we come in here to note assignment mode and deal with the emphasis slider and the dynamic slider, because these two sections right here, and really everything in the sound editor except for the equalizer, right? Everything in the sound editor except for the equalizer works on each individual note. We're going to get a better response now that we've actually separated these notes the way that we want. Okay, so first up is this emphasis slider. Like I said, this is some attitude. So if we listen in solo, I want you to watch what we can do right here and listen to how this changes as I push the emphasis. And if I push it too far, you'll see we get into sound design territory. Let's check this out. As you can hear, that's totally sound design territory right there. That's not really what we're looking for, so we can back off a little bit. Now, you may have seen these numbers jumping in kind of larger chunks right there, and sometimes it's important to move with fine control. In this case, the Option quick key. Option key gives us fine control, so I can more easily make minute adjustments with this. If you ever want to jump back to the center, you can just Command click right there, and that works. Okay, here we go. I'm looking for where we can really make this jump out, but not really have a lot of the artifacts that go if we push it too far. And this is where a very useful feature right here that I love about the sound editor is the bypass control, right? So let's give this a listen. Start off with the regular guitar. This is bypassed. Here we go. Okay, but this really only matters in context, right? So let's unsolo this and let's see how this sounds when I move this back and adjust this emphasis a little bit while we're listening to the rest of the song. So I'm going to Command click to reset it, and here's the song. Let's use bypass to turn that on and off and see how it works. We'll start off with it bypassed. All right, now the opposite is true. I can actually lower this emphasis and get this sound to blend in a little further, right? Let's reset this and hear what that sounds like. Here we go, bypassing on and off, starting with it bypassed. Now, you could just use your fader, right, to raise and lower this instrument to make it more prominent in the mix or a little bit less prominent. But that's a different result, right? This is not emphasizing or changing the attitude of it. That would just be lowering the overall level. Now, another beautiful thing about the sound editor, and specifically for these two sliders right here, is the output gain control, right? So what we can do is decide if we want it to blend a little bit more and then maybe make it a little bit louder. Or maybe what we want it to do is make it pop a little more and then bring it down into the mix a little bit. It will still be a different tonality. Let's try that. I like making it pop a little bit more. So I'm going to make it pop a little bit and then lower the output gain. Let's check this out. Okay, let's bypass that again and kind of check the difference a little bit. This may be a subtle difference at this point, but I like it a little bit because it alters the attitude of the playing, but still gets it to sit where I want it to in the mix. Here we go, starting with it bypassed. I like that. I feel like it feels like they're digging in a little bit more, but I've got it to sit where I want it to in the mix. Very, very useful. Okay. Now the next slider that I really like is this dynamic slider right here. And this works differently than the amplitude tool or the leveler macro that we've got up here, right? The amplitude tool makes an individual note louder or softer, but this dynamics right here deals with the envelope of each individual note. So we're talking about the attack, the decay, the sustain, and the release of that individual note right there. And if you look at these two graphics right here, these graphics are kind of self-explanatory, right? If we move this to the left, we're going to have a longer note, right? That note is going to go longer before it really drops off at the end. If you move this dynamic slider to the right, that note is going to drop off in volume sooner. So again, we're changing the volume envelope within each individual note, and that changes how these react. Let's give this a listen in isolation, in solo, and see how it sounds. You can hear if we push that to the right, we're really getting rid of a lot of the body and the sustain and just kind of leaving the attack. Let's push this back in the other direction and see how it sounds. Again, we can always push this too far. Usually with these controls, subtle amounts I think does the best, but we can always push it further if we really want to. If you want to get something ugly on purpose, that's great. Let's hear this in context and kind of see which one we like with the song playing right there. In context, I like sort of decreasing the dynamic range of each one of these notes a little bit. However, another great feature of this is this allows you to really play with some features here into a compressor, or succinctly, sometimes if you get something that has already been kind of crushed and overcompressed, you can use this slider to back that off a little bit. This can actually save some overcompression a little bit. But in this case, let's say I want to use a compressor on this acoustic guitar like this LA3A right here. I really like this particular compressor. However, it doesn't really have attack and release controls. So now we can utilize this dynamics to shape the envelope of each note going into it, which I think is very, very powerful. Here this is with compression in isolation. Now, in this case, I think decreasing the dynamic range kind of works against us with this compressor right here, but watch what happens if I increase the dynamic range. Okay, let's try this and then hear this within context. And I'm going to use some of this makeup gain right here to see how this works. All right, great. Another very powerful tool to shape how these notes respond, right? How they're emphasized, their attitude, their duration, how this performance was actually played right here. Hope you've enjoyed this today. Thanks.